We'll be covering today Russian Revolution, which we have to study in your GS paper one World History. And the guy on your screen is Vladimir Lenin. We'll learn about him. And the Russian Revolution is said to be the first applied part of Marxism. Like if Marxism was the theory, Russian Revolution was the first theoretical experiment. It's basically a pair of revolution. That means there were two revolutions. The first one happened in February 1917 and which dismantled the autocratic Tsar's rule, the Romanov dynasty. That's the name of the dynasty, and the rulers were named as they were called as an adjective was used for them, that is Tsar, CZAR, Tsar. The people who threw away the Tsars were known as, their group was known as Mensheviks. Same year, October, Mensheviks were removed by Bolsheviks. Lenin belonged to Bolsheviks. And in 1921, the Soviet Republic was established. What were the causes? There were many causes. First, we'll shall see the social causes. Russia was a privilege-based society. It means that merit was not respected. Privilege was the only means through which you can rise at the top. It means that once you are in a privileged position, your coming generations will remain in privileged position. So where you were born, to whom you were born was important rather than with what content you were born. Catholic priests, they lived a colorful life and exercised massive influence on Tsar. This is something that there is a set of uniformity between all autocratic regimes, whether you see that in India, ancient and medieval, whether there were Brahmins closely related with the ruling Kshatriyas, or the ulemas closely related with the sultans and Mughals. There in France, before the French Revolution, you will see church actively supporting the dynasty, divine right theory. Okay, here also the same thing was happening. And there was a guy called Rasputin. He was a priest, and he allegedly had an affair with Queen Zarina. This was not liked by people. Like the queen is having affair with Rasputin. Oh, so bad. And nobles and aristocrats had access to massive resources, something very similar to the French society that we have seen in the French Revolution. Okay, just that there were no classification of states like we had in French Revolution, the first state, second state, and third state. So they led a very luxurious life. They had access to the top posts, and post American and French Revolution, entire Europe was trying to reconcile with the ideas of new democracy, liberty, equality, rule of law. All things were being demanded by the people over there. Now, the nobles and aristocrats in Russia, they were very apprehensive of these things because these ideas would have affected their privileged position. So they never liked these ideas emanating from Europe to Russia. And they were scared that something similar might happen here, something similar like French Revolution might occur here also. Economic conditions, peasants and workers lived in a bad condition. The social inequality was prevalent. Of course, the privilege was confined to a few people. So peasants and workers, of course, were living in a very bad condition. And deprivation makes people angry. They were deprived for a long period of time, so they were angry because of it. And Marxism and socialism was also, sweeping the entire Europe in 19th century. Karl Marx died in 1883, but the idea still remains relevant. We have seen that in Marxism. So intellectuals, writers, they were writing about it. There were neo-Marxist people who followed Marx, Gramsci, you know, Lenin himself. So this Marxism talked about equality. This Marxism talked about giving individual restoring the individual dignity. So of course the privileged positions has to go away with. Now Russians also like this idea, and the only thing that was in between equality and privileged position was monarchy. So they wanted to get away with monarchy. Marx and Maxim Gorky, they were the two writers who influenced people, Karl Marx and Maxim Gorky. Gorky was also a Marxist. So these people, Karl Marx, we all know, and Gorky also wrote about the same ideas. And these writings had a profound impact on people in Russia. Now, the First World War happened, 1914 to 1919, and like any ambitious monarch, Tsar also was nurturing the imperial ambitions. As Japan defeated it, so people were angry that a small country, an Asian country, a small country like Japan has defeated uh, someone of the size of Russia. And Tsar himself lived a very lavish life, like all the previous monarchs. War always increases expenses by putting burden on the resources. Russia was lacking revenue, workers were exploited, perfect condition for a revolution. Corruption and inefficiency was seen in every box of life. So Tsar failed to address any of the problem and the masses revolted. So they had every reason, social reasons, economic reasons, and oppressive regime, no grievance redressal mechanism. Forget about redressal, there was no one to hear it. Okay. So what will people do? Over a period of time, they will revolt. That's what they did. Structural problem in Russia. Okay. And Tsar failed to address any of them because there was no suitable mechanism. Rampant corruption and inefficient administration. And this guy, the Tsar, thought that if I capture territory, people will be happy that I have added to the Russian territory. But opposite thing happened. He was defeated, and that too by Japan, an Asian country, a small Asian country defeating someone of the size of Russia, an island country defeats an empire. So whatever little relief Tsar had, whatever little image Tsar had, it went for a blow. Unrest developed in Russia, and people started demanding reform. So Tsar created Duma, that was the parliamentary body. It was a symbolic gesture by him. Did not do anything over here, but he created Duma. Duma had very limited powers, and his opponents could not be elected, and the body could not change Russian laws. A very limited power, as I told you earlier, it was a symbolic gesture. Peter Stolypin, the new prime minister, he tries to bring some reforms, and Stolypin was murdered in 1911 in front of Tsar. He was pro poor, he was pro people, so he tried to usher in some reform. 1911, he was killed, and Tsar was there, and people thought that Tsar is the one who has killed him because he was working for our happiness. Now, he started something known as Pan Slav movement. Extremely turbulent times started, and Tsar came up with his Pan Slav movement. This movement said that all the Slavs of Eastern Europe are one people. Slav means one log. Slav matlab people. So all the Slav of Eastern Europe are one. He was trying to make people appeal to the Russian Slav concept of nationalism. So he tried to cover all those parts. Wanted to annex all those parts, and he entered World War One. WW1 is World War One, and Russians did not like it. That instead of focusing on reforms, instead of trying to improve the economy, he is trying to wage a war because he has his imperial ambitions. He's nurturing his imperial ambitions. Instead of focusing on people, he's going for a war. And see, 17 lakh soldiers died. That's massive. Economic crisis intensifies. So war will always intensify economic crisis, more so when the economy is in doldrum, as pre First World War Russia was. So Russians started to protest against their king, and he abdicates throne in favor of his brother Michael. He tried to act clever. He gave the throne to his brother, but Michael was cleverer. So he denied. He said, no, I'm not going to take this throne. There's nothing left for me to do. You have already spoiled everything. Alexander Kerensky, Social Democrats, he forms a provisional government, and it happened in February 1917. He belonged to Menshevik, the Social Democrat Party, which was formed by George Plekhanov in 1883, the same year when Karl Marx died, 1883. So again, a Marxist approach was here. And from this very party, Alexander Kerensky was heading the government, the Social Democrat Party, Menshevik, and but these guys did not withdrew from war. They said that we have lost so much of men, we have spent so much of resources, so I am not going to withdraw from war because before consolidating on the efforts that I have put. So let me at least get some parts, and gradually we will withdraw from the First World War. Now, Leon Trotsky from Bolshevik Party, he called for urgent reforms, that we need reforms. Please try to do something. Now, there was a difference between the approach of these two groups. Mensheviks believed in party system, participation election, something close to democracy. Bolsheviks were convinced that a country like Russia, where no democratic rights ever existed, a party organized on parliamentary lines would not be effective. We need a party like Workers' Party who would abide by the discipline of the party and work for the revolution. Typical Marxist approach. We do not need democracy, we do not need party because people cannot govern themselves. That's what the reason is, that this country is not mature enough to handle democracy. So we are the privileged one. We are having all the wisdom in our heads. We will direct people what to do. So do not ask for elections or party. We want a committed set of committed cadre. This was the Bolshevik view, unlike the Menshevik view. See what Lenin is saying: the capitalists will sell us the rope with which we will hang them. Now, when I show this slide in class, people are tell me, students tell me, sir, he does not look like a communist. He looks like a capitalist. I cannot help. This is the way he dressed, but he was a communist. People demanded four things: peace, land to the tiller. Tiller means farmer. So the one who will farm, one who will cultivate, will own the land. Control of industry by workers, equal status of non-Russian nationalities, because there were many people living in Russia other than Russians, and they wanted equality. Menshevik under Kerensky did not implement any of these. Social Democrats, Mensheviks, Kerensky, he did not implement any of these demands, and gradually the people's support was lost. So now Lenin emerges. Now Lenin was the leader of Bolsheviks, and he put forward a clear policies to end the war and transfer land to the peasants. And he advanced the slogans: "All power to the Soviet." Soviet means people. And he even said that Russian Empire is a prison of nations, because, as I told you, there were people other than Russians who were living there. Their equality was one of the foremost demand before the Menshevik government. They could not bring it, so Lenin is trying to appeal to that very particular section, and he promised equal rights to all. So finally, the Kerensky government collapsed on 7th of November 1917. According to Gregorian calendar, it was October, because Russia was using some other calendar. That's why it's called October Revolution. And immediately, as Lenin promised, Russia withdrew from the First World War. And see, these states, the property of landlords, church, and czar was confiscated and were transferred to the peasants. Control of industries was transferred to the shop committees of workers. And by 1918, banks, insurance industries, mines, railways, everything was nationalized. What do you mean by nationalized? Like all all the ownership was transferred to the government, and it was very peaceful revolution. Only two people died. Officers of the army of Tsar organized an armed rebellion, and they were helped by Japan, England, etc. Because these people never liked the new revolution, and they were helped by Japan and this England, because everyone wanted monarchy to be there. Japan wanted monarchy, England wanted monarchy, because they were having easy time dealing with the monarch of Russia. And they were also scared that something might happen in our country also. The ripple effect, the cascading effect that the revolution has. So new state had Red Army, which was badly equipped. That was the army of the Lenin, the Red Army. Red is the color of the communists, the comrades. It was badly equipped, and because workers and peasants were there, but it won. It won because mainly because they fight with a lot of zeal, lot of zest and enthusiasm, and they were aware of the local geographical conditions. This was also one of the reasons. Now, what was the consequence of this revolution? We shall examine it. Overthrow of autocracy, destruction of aristocracy and power of church, union of Soviet Socialist Republic (USSR) developed, and old socialist ideal, which Lenin gave from each according to his capacity to each according to his work. Remember, Karl Marx has said from each according to his capacity to each according to his need. We'll try to understand this slogan a bit. What Marx meant, just replace work with need and you will get the quotation of Karl Marx. Whatever one has the capacity to work and whatever you need. मैं इसको एक एग्जांपल से समझाता हूँ आप लोगों को तुरंत समझ में आ जाएगा लाइक यू स्टडी फॉर 2 hours a day दैट्स योर कैपेसिटी ज्यादा बोल दिया चलो 1 hour a day you study for 1 hour a day and you want to compete the UPSC that's your need so despite your efforts despite your capacity your need shall be fulfilled this is what Karl Marx says this is what will happen in his ideal communist state that is why it's an utopia what Lenin says according to his capacities to each according to his work so if you study for 1 hour a day you know which exam you are going to qualify not UPSC for sure okay so herein lies the difference Lenin says before we reach the level of ideal communist state everyone will not get what he needs but how much he works for private property was abolished immediately and economic planning was adopted by the state like the state would do the economic planning work became an essential requirement as there was no unearned income to live on right to work became a constitutional right it was the duty of the government to provide you job and because of this rigorous implementation of these policies the USSR emerged as the major power in the world within few years of the revolution and it has few parallels in world history socialist ideas were intended for universal application you know it was the first revolution that proclaimed building of a socialist society as its objective everything will be owned by the society communist revolution the third Comintern was formed and why was it formed to promote revolution USSR emerged as the leader of the world communist movement communist parties were formed in many countries of the world with the objective of bringing about revolution communist party of India was formed at that time MN Roy from India went there he shared space with Lenin achievements of USSR redefined democracy of course Marxism has broadened the base of democracy from democracy to be real political rights without social and economic rights would not suffice and the idea that state will play an active role in regulating the economy was accepted okay forget Adam Smith which he says that business of business is to do business state shall do everything he that does not work neither shall he eat this idea was revived by the Russian Revolution imagine this he that does not work neither shall he eat how many will starve in India Russian Revolution served to hasten the end of imperialism. And Marx has already said this that a nation which enslaves another nation can never be free. The socialists all over the world campaigned for ending imperialism. Soviet state was looked upon as a friend of the people of colonies. USSR openly supported the independence of all nations from foreign rule. Chacha Nehru had a deep impact from Russian Revolution. This is what he wrote in his autobiography, The Discovery of India, that Russian Revolution made me think of politics much more in terms of social change. So that was our first prime minister. And I'll add to it. What happened was, for the first time, this ideas of social equality, state ownership, state being the active agent of bringing any social change. For the first time, these things happened in Russia. Russian revolutionaries were against imperialism. So naturally, the colonies had their sympathies with Russia, USSR. They championed the cause. They were against European imperial hegemony. So Asian African countries were inspired. That is why Pandit Nehru was also inspired, because these things were very appealing to anyone who lived in a colony. And state control mechanism was developed. Free market was gone. So a different type of thing was happening, something which was not happening in Europe. And India had a profound impact. Even after independence, we have adopted the socialist model. We also went for economic planning, the typical Soviet model, 5-year plans and all. So Russian Revolution and the socialist word was again included in the preamble by Indira Gandhi during emergency. And despite all the new economic policies, the country's economic character still largely remains socialist. So that was the thing that you need to know about the Russian Revolution. I shall welcome all your questions.